At the narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf, where a strip of water controls the pulse of the global economy, a silent confrontation is unfolding. Iran believed it had found the pressure point, a choke point so critical that the world would hesitate before pushing back. But according to this analysis, what Tehran expected to be leverage may have triggered the opposite response, a hard reset of power at sea. Now, with warships moving, channels being controlled, and the Strait of Hormuz turning into the stage for a dangerous test of will, this is no longer just a regional standoff. It is a story about miscalculation, power, and how one of the world's most strategic waterways can pull nations to the edge of a much larger conflict.
And so more on this with retired General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst. So we're 4 minutes into this new strategy. Tell us your thoughts on the ability to get this to a better conclusion after the talks broke down.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the timing is exquisite here in terms of what's actually taken place. I mean, clearly, Iran had the momentum and the upper hand when they shut down the Straits of Hormuz, and then the administration went to a ceasefire, and Iran got what they wanted. They wanted the war to stop. So we went into negotiations, and clearly the president gave his negotiators clear instructions here, and he wanted everything, and he didn't get everything. The Iranians kind of surprised me a little bit. I think they actually miscalculated somewhat, because I think they overplayed their hand in the sense of what the Straits of Hormuz and taking control of it meant. We all understand the significance it means in the region and its impact on the world economy. Got that. But I think they believed it had more impact on the president and his team than that. And they expected us to fold and make some concessions because they believed they had us in the right place based on the fact that they were now in control of the Straits of Hormuz. And that wasn't the case at all. You know, my confidence is always in the president. He's the number one backstop here. And he's not going to make a bad deal. And that's the reality of it. In terms of what's in front of us now, this is the right thing to do. We now have taken a momentum away from Iran. That is clear. We're in the hour of execution. Ships are coming on a channel that CENTCOM is demanding them to talk to on, and they will control their transit on that channel and tell them where to go and what to do. Anybody that tests it will see Marines boarding those ships. If Iran wants to test these things, that's what they're going to get. Likely, they'll have to calculate that. Do they really want the humiliation of that taking place with the Marines on international television boarding one of their ships that are carrying their oil? It may not be their flagship, but it's carrying their oil. Or Iran is also threatening to take out some of the other ports facilities, certainly, or take out the oil production capabilities in the Gulf states or the natural gas production capability in Qatar. Or they could just stalemate and sweat this out a little bit with the United States, believing that the United States eventually would relent, because after all, oil isn't flowing to the degree it should flow. But remember, the escape valve here is what we have in place is the United States is going to permit the transit of oil for countries that are non-Iranian ports. It remains to be seen whether those ships will still transit because they believe Iran can intervene in it. So the second piece of this, and we haven't discussed it much, is we have the blockade. That's piece one. But we certainly believe that we will have to make certain the straits are open and clear. And that will take another operation by Central Command. They have obviously begun that operation by sending up, as you pointed out, a couple of destroyers. And we've got some underground drones looking for these mines that aren't tracked by the Iranians. So we got some mine sweeping to do. We got some clearance to do. And then also we have to secure the transit of all those other ships. And remember, for our audience to understand, this is an implication of the defense budget. When Reagan came after the Iranians in '88 because they were interfering with the transit of oil through the region, he had twice the number of ships that we have in the United States Navy now. We're under 300. Then he was closer to 600. We had a different Navy, and all the atrophy of Obama budgets and the 9/11 wars have brought us to this place. And the importance of the Trump defense budget in not just building up the Navy. The Army is the smallest it's been since prior to World War II. The Air Force is down 40-year low. That is going to be imperative. But this is a graphic illustration of why you need a larger Navy.
Remember the two objectives here, right? Strait of Hormuz and the nuclear program. Those seem to be A and B in terms of priorities. I'm curious to know, General, what card does Iran play? Because if they fire one shot, we're going back to war before the sun goes down here in New York.
Yeah, they certainly understand that. I'm confident. I think likely in front of us, I think our tactic would be let the ceasefire play out to its duration and event the Iranians want to come back and talk some more, and they may very well. I mean, they know now how stiff the Americans are in their position, and they may be willing to make some concessions they weren't made before. And as I've said time and time again here, Bill, even when they make those kind of concessions, you got to be completely skeptical about it, because their likelihood is just to delay the ceasefire, which because that's in their interest and certainly not in ours. Yes, the Iranians know we'll go back to combat operations, but believe me, I think once the ceasefire ends, I think we need to go back to combat operations anyway. I mean, Cooper running Central Command and Zamir running the IDF, they both had close to 2 weeks left of targets to take down. That tells us there's still something out there, and I think we should go out and finish it. If there's very critical targets and we want to do something limited, then that's absolutely essential. But I think those commanders should drive, and certainly then they're going to do that. They're going to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu and also President Trump, here's what we have left, here's what the tasks are ahead of us, and those decisions will be made accordingly.
General Keane, thank you. As we get underway with this blockade, just about 10 minutes in, and great to have your input this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the end, this is not only a story about ships, strategy, or military language spoken in calm television tones. It is a story about the terrifying fragility of global order, how a narrow corridor of water can suddenly become the hinge on which oil prices, supply chains, diplomacy, and the threat of war all begin to turn at once. The Strait of Hormuz has always been more than geography. It is leverage. It is a vulnerability. It is one of those rare places where maps stop being abstract and become brutally personal. Because what happens there does not stay there. It reaches gas stations, grocery bills, shipping routes, political speeches, and the private anxieties of millions of ordinary people who may never see the Gulf, but will still pay the price if it ignites. What gives this moment its dramatic weight is the idea at the center of the video, that Iran may have believed it held the upper hand. In this telling, shutting down or threatening control over such a vital artery was supposed to force hesitation, create fear, and extract concessions. That is the logic of brinkmanship. Make the cost of resisting you seem so high that your opponent starts looking for the least painful compromise. But history is full of moments where leaders misread the psychology of the other side. They mistake patience for weakness, caution for fear, and restraint for surrender. And when that happens, a pressure tactic can become a trigger. A move meant to dominate the board can instead provoke a far more dangerous response than anyone first intended. That is why this moment feels cinematic in the truest documentary sense. Not because of explosions or spectacle, but because of tension, controlled tension. The kind where every sentence carries consequences. Ships entering monitored channels, Marines potentially boarding vessels, destroyers moving into place, drones searching for mines beneath the surface. It is the language of preparation, and preparation is often where the real drama lives. Long before history records a battle, it records the posture that made battle possible. And here, the posture itself tells a story. Both sides appear to understand that one direct shot could shatter the ceasefire and collapse the distance between pressure and war in a matter of hours. But beyond the military chessboard lies the deeper reality, economics. Because waterways like Hormuz do not just carry oil, they carry stability. They carry assumptions. They carry the illusion that the systems powering modern life will keep working tomorrow the way they worked yesterday. Once that illusion cracks, everything becomes more expensive. Not just fuel, but food, shipping, insurance, confidence, and time. In the video, the blockade is framed not as an isolated maneuver, but as part of a much larger strategic struggle over who controls movement, who controls pressure, and who can endure disruption longer. That is what makes the story so compelling. The battlefield is not only physical, it is psychological and financial. It is about who breaks first, politically, economically, or militarily. And then there is the question that shadows every modern conflict. What happens if neither side wants to look weak? Because that is often how escalations become self-fulfilling. A nation makes a move to prove strength. The other side answers to preserve credibility. Then the answer itself demands another answer. Step by step, signal by signal, a chain reaction begins. Not because war was always the first choice, but because backing down becomes harder with every public commitment. In that kind of environment, miscalculation becomes as dangerous as aggression. One mine, one intercepted vessel, one humiliation broadcast to the world, one commander deciding the line has been crossed, and suddenly, diplomacy is no longer steering events. Events are steering diplomacy. The video also points towards something larger than the immediate crisis. The question of readiness, naval size, strategic endurance, the burden of policing sea lanes in a world where old assumptions no longer hold. That matters because great powers are rarely tested only by whether they can strike. They are tested by whether they can sustain control, protect commerce, reassure allies, and deter escalation all at once. Power is not just the ability to hit back. Power is the ability to impose order under pressure. And when analysts begin invoking past eras, past fleets, and past strategic advantages, what they are really saying is that this moment is exposing the gap between what a nation wants to guarantee and what it is fully prepared to sustain. So the real heartbeat of this story is not simply whether Iran expected this response. It is whether anyone fully understands what comes after a response like this. Because once a choke point becomes a contest of wills, every option carries cost. If pressure works, it invites repetition. If force works, it invites retaliation. If talks resume, suspicion poisons every promise. And if neither side yields, the world enters that most dangerous space of all. The waiting room before escalation, where markets tremble, militaries posture, and everyone claims to want stability while preparing for instability. That is why this moment should be watched as more than just another news segment. It is a window into how modern power behaves under stress, how nations gamble on perception, how geography becomes destiny, and how one of the smallest spaces on the map can suddenly hold the largest consequences. Because in the end, the Strait of Hormuz is not just a route through water. It is a reminder that the modern world is held together by narrow passages, uneasy calculations, and fragile restraint. And when any one of those begins to fail, the shock does not remain local for long. So as this chapter closes, the biggest question is not who sounded strongest on television. It is who is prepared for the cost if this pressure campaign turns into something irreversible. Because once the first real line is crossed, there is no dramatic soundtrack, no pause, no reset, only consequence. And that is what makes this story unforgettable. The realization that sometimes the world changes not with an explosion, but with a slow tightening at sea, a rising sense of inevitability, and the knowledge that everyone involved may already be closer to the edge than they are willing to admit.